Disney is a cultural media machine that has shaped the childhoods of millions around the globe. However, we will be pulling back the curtain of this magical world and diving into the depths of Disney's darkness. Prepare to delve into unsettling topics, including disturbing subliminal messages embedded in Disney films, chilling accounts of tragic deaths linked to the brand, and dark allegations surrounding animal abuse and human trafficking. I'm your host, Magnum, and this is the Swerve Podcast. What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the Swerve Podcast. I hope everyone's doing well. I have an exciting, extensive episode in store for everybody. It's going to be a banger. It's going to challenge you. It's going to disturb you. But before we begin today's episode, I have an important announcement in the Pre-Amble. Izzo has moved on from the show. I want to take a moment and wish him the best in his future endeavors and thank him for his contributions to the podcast. Life is a force of constant change, and this podcast is no different. So may good karma and vibes be with you always. And thank you so much for having been a part of this show. Now, I realize this departure might appear sudden to you all, given that Izzo was just in last week's episode. But the thing is, we record the majority of episodes up to a month in advance. So this was known behind the scenes for some time. Moving forward, this puts the show in a liminal space, per se. This is kind of an eerie moment of uncertain transition. My choices are to, 1, end the Swerve podcast, or 2, move forward and continue the project solo. So I've thought long and hard about all of this, and I decided that I'm not fucking leaving. I'm not fucking leaving. There's a whole universe to explore, and someone has to do it. One obscure topic at a time. I'm committed to bringing you guys the wildest topics I can possibly find and doing the deepest dives that I can possibly do. So with that, let's get into it. Disney Darkness was the winner of the January voting block on the Patreon page. Now, on that note, here's a reminder to sign up for free on Patreon if you'd like to help decide what topics are covered on the podcast. You can go to patreon.com/the Swerve Podcast and press the blue join for free button. You can then create an account with an email and password within a minute, and you'll have access to topic voting instantly. Now, voting opens on the 1st of each month and closes on the 15th. So I would hurry up and sign up now so that you don't miss the next voting block, or so that you can vote in the current voting block if it's open. Today's topic was recommended by an OG pimp and longtime supporter of the show, Spurgalicious Asshat. Disney is kind of something that's always pissed me off, to be honest. So maybe I'm going to be coming at this topic somewhat biased, but I'd like to get into the basics of today's show. So as always, when dealing with topics with a darker subject matter, I'd like to give a disclaimer right off the hop. This episode contains references that may not be suitable for all listeners. We're going to be dealing with some graphic descriptions and generally unsettling and disturbing as fuck content. If these things bother you or you're somewhat sensitive, I would just recommend to skip this one. I would just skip it. It's going to be getting pretty hardcore, especially in the final section of today's topic. So if this is going to bother you, just skip this one. That's what I would do. There's still time to pretend Disney is the happiest place on earth. You can still have that fantasy. You don't have to continue listening. But if you do, we're going to be going into some of the darkest shit that I've come across in a long time regarding a family-friendly brand. Now, I'd also like to say, if you're a Disney adult, do not let this podcast spoil that for you. Keep your Mickey Mouse ears on and just move on. This is not for you. I would like to say I'm going to be trying something a little different with this episode. I want to cover things in an iceberg style format. If anybody is unfamiliar with that style, the idea is to begin with surface level topics that most would know about the topic and then slowly dive deeper into the depths, featuring more obscure and fringe things as we go. So the iceberg metaphor is that the top is visible, but the majority of the iceberg remains hidden beneath. And we're going to be going so deep that we're going to be even getting into the ocean. We're going to go past the depths of the iceberg and continue into the depths of the ocean. That's how fucking dark this one's going to get. Another thing I want to say is there's a ton of allegations and unverifiable things that are going to be mentioned throughout this episode. I have a massive list of references in the description if you'd like to dig further on anything, but I want to mention it's important to take some of these things obviously with a grain of salt. There's a lot of weird urban legends and myths that don't necessarily have a lot of grounding in anything. I would take some things with a grain of salt, but on the other hand, there's also a lot of well-documented news coverage and reports on various events as well. So I just put your critical thinking caps on. Disney adults, take the Mickey Mouse hat on, put your critical thinking cap on. We're going to get through this here. What is Disney? Disney is a massive multinational media and entertainment conglomerate. It was founded on October 16th, 1923. And today, this company is within the top 50 companies on Earth. It's valued at $204 billion as of January 2025 when I looked it up. One thing about Disney that I've always disliked is that it's spelled like Gizney. Looks like a G. That's something that's kind of always pissed me off. I don't know. Is it just me? Does anybody else see it as a G instead of a D? I've always seen it as a G. Disney is out of control. This company owns basically everything. Not literally, but they own, obviously, Walt Disney Pictures, Walt Disney Animation Studios, Pixar, Marvel Studios, Lucasfilm, 20th Century Studios, 20th Century Animation, Searchlight Pictures, ABC Television Network. Did you know that Disney owns news? They obviously own the Disney Channel. They also own ESPN, Freeform, FX, National Geographic, Disney Plus, ESPN Plus, obviously, Hulu, Hotstar, and Disney Experiences, which include the theme parks, the resort hotels, and the cruise lines that are located around the world. They own a lot of stuff. They're huge. This is a massive, influential corporation. Obviously, Disney's not really known for the news. They're not known for ESPN. They're most well known for their media content. They've produced some of the most iconic films of all time. People cite The Lion King, Pinocchio, Finding Nemo, Toy Story, Frozen. The list goes on. I will admit, Disney does have very great storytelling mechanics and very memorable characters. We'll talk more about that as we get through this episode. Maybe they just stole a lot of that. Well, actually, they did steal a lot of that. We'll get into that as we go here. But in combination with all of that, the storytelling, the memorable characters, they have massive box office numbers. They absolutely crush. So they're extremely influential. Everybody knows about this. People are raised on this. The company caters to family-friendly content. However, as we shall soon see, this is merely the tip of the iceberg. The Disney brand brings up thoughts and images of magic and wonder, but what if beneath that cheerful facade lies a darker narrative? In this section, we're going to discuss the shadows of Disney, exploring saucy subliminal messages, uncanny urban legends, and creepy conspiracies that have haunted the House of Mouse for decades. Is Walt Disney's head cryogenically frozen and preserved? Are the animators and producers actually cryptic perverts embedding hidden messages in beloved film? Here we uncover the myths that blur the lines between fantasy and reality. So we're going to start with some of these subliminal messages. You could call this Dirty Disney. Let's start with The Lion King. The Lion King is a 1994 animated film by Disney. There is a scene where Simba kicks up some dust. And I want to mention, most people say it's stars in this photograph. This is a very famous photograph. It's not actually stars. It's dust that Simba kicked up. Here we are correcting things, putting things straight on the Swerve podcast already. What's interesting, though, this dust, as it's flying through the air, it forms the word sex for a brief moment. This is pretty wild to have in a children's film. Now, if you go on Snopes, they will claim that it actually spells SFX, which refers to the in-house special effects team. SFX means special effects, so it's a nod to the in-house team. But I don't know if I necessarily buy that. I don't know. Let me know what you guys think. If you're aware of this one, it really does just look like the word sex to me. I think SFX could be a cop-out. I don't know. The other thing with The Lion King, this is even more out of control. There's a Disney promotional poster. It's called The King Has Returned, and it quite literally looks like it depicts a near naked woman front and center on the image. And not only that, the lion's face, it resembles this topless woman wearing a thong bent over with her arms out as if she's about to go doggy style. This is one of the most crazy ones out of all of these. It literally looks exactly like I'm saying. There's a woman bent over, thong arms out. It's a magical land of wonder at Disney, I suppose. Now, the next is The Little Mermaid. This is a very popular one. I'm sure many of us have heard of this. The Little Mermaid. This is a 1989 animated film by Disney. And there's a rogue phallic art malfunction. We'll call it that. On the cover of The Little Mermaid VHS tape, there's a rogue, massive, glimmering golden dick in the palace. It's front and center in the artwork. This is very crazy. And, you know, maybe there's somewhat of a metaphor here, a dick in the palace. This rings somewhat true from a metaphorical stance, right? Think the royal family. I mean, there's got to be a dick somewhere that lives in that palace. Now, the phallic structure has since been removed from later editions, but this one is very obvious and very weird. It's very obviously a phallus. Whoever drew it, I don't think they made a mistake. The other thing that's crazy about The Little Mermaid is in it, there's another rogue phallic art malfunction. Twice this is happening. There's a wedding scene where there's an old priest officiating the ceremony, and he appears to be overstimulated. He's displaying a tiny mini erection as he's officiating the ceremony. This bulge that is in the artwork, it's claimed that this is supposed to be his knee bending. So it's like a little kneecap sticking out. But where it's placed, it's actually very easy to be misinterpreted. And Disney has since redrawn this scene and they've sansed out the boner. So it's gone. I'm just surprised this old guy had it in him. Fully erect in a wedding ceremony. Next, Aladdin. This is a 1992 animated film by Disney. And Aladdin is pretending to be the prince and is waiting for Jasmine. When the tiger comes in, Aladdin is officially claimed to say one of two things. They really can't get their story straight here. But the official claim is that he says, quote, "Good tiger, take off, scat, go," end quote. Or the other claim is he says, quote, "Good kitty, take off and go," end quote. That's the official narrative. But when you listen to this section, it really sounds like he's saying, quote, "Good teenagers take off their clothes," end quote. Now, I'm going to let you listeners be the judge. I'm going to insert the recording here, and you tell me what it sounds like. Does it sound like "Good tiger, take off, scat, go," "Good kitty, take off and go," or does it really sound like the more sinister description? Let's play that now.
So how's our little Bo doing?
Come on, good king. Take off. Down, king.
Wait.
Good king. Take off. Down, king.
Wait.
Good king. Take off.
So what do you think? I'd like to address Cinderella next. This is a 1950 animated Disney film. It's super old. There's a scene in which a mouse appears to have inserted, and this is going to sound kind of crazy, but when you look at the image, it really does look like this. There's a mouse, a large mouse, that looks like it's inserted anal beads into his backside. Allegedly, this is supposed to be the beads being thread on his tail as a method to hold the beads. But it really, really does not look like that at all. And his friend is like threading the tail. So it looks like the friend is stimulating this large mouse with a string of beads. And what's worse, Cinderella wears them on her neck later. The prince is like still attracted. It's kind of nasty. But this is what's in Cinderella. This is what the kids are being exposed to. It's out of control. Next, there's the Mickey and Minnie Mouse Adventures. This is Another phallic art malfunction. Minnie's body appears to be a giant, raging blue cock. And not only that, Mickey appears to be grabbing it with his right hand. And not only that, this blue penis appears to be pointing right at his open mouth. You know, at least we can say officially that we know Mickey's not left-handed. At least we can settle that debate. It really does look like exactly what I'm describing. And I realize this is a podcast. You're just going to have to take my word for it. But I do have links to everything that I'm mentioning in the description of today's podcast. Now, the next one, this is a very blatant one. You can't really argue that this is a misinterpretation with this next one. There's a film called The Rescuers, and it's a 1977 animated Disney film featuring cartoon mice. In the film, at around the 38-minute mark, it also features, legitimately, a topless woman in a window as the characters fly by on a bird. This isn't even abstract. This is definitely not a misinterpretation in this case. There's literally a photo of a topless human woman in the window as these characters fly by. Somehow this got past editors. I don't know what happened exactly, but I can say that Disney recalled the film in 1999, but it has already been out for 22 years at that point. It's pretty wild. And you know, I think a lot of these things made it through screening because back in the day on VHS and stuff, you know, you could pause, but it's not like people were pausing all the time. And then as soon as you get to like DVDs and stuff, it's very easy to get stills and come across these single frames. So I think there's something with that going on. I'm not sure. The next thing I want to talk about is Who Framed Roger Rabbit? Who Framed Roger Rabbit is a Disney film that came out in 1988. And there's 3 frames in the film in which the cartoon character Jessica Rabbit, she's like this woman in a red dress. People are probably familiar with that trope to some extent. But she appears to be repping a bald eagle as she spins around and her dress rises up. There's no panties. It's just exposed and right there for 3 frames. This is a pretty wild one as well. I don't know what's going on with these Disney animators, but I really don't think that this is a mistake. I think they're throwing this stuff in there and people just come across it later because it's so hard to come across these frame stills with the technology at the time, right? This is 1988 we're talking about. But here we go again. Let's go on to another crazy subliminal message being put in a Disney film, allegedly. This is Tangled. This was a Disney film from 2010, and it's based on the fairy tale of Rapunzel. The movie poster depicts Rapunzel lassoing a dude with her hair wrapping around his body. But guess what this spells if you look at it closely? This hair wrapping around his body spells out the word sex. So here we are again, Disney throwing in the word sex in a children's film. Is it supposed to be SFX? I didn't even look at Snopes for this one. I was just like, this is enough. This happened twice. I'm not sure I'm buying it. The next one, Hunchback of Notre Dame. This is a 1996 animated film by Disney. And in this film, there's a character called Esmeralda. She's the main feature girl in this film. And there's a scene where she looks semi-nude or fully nude for a moment in the flames. She's depicted as this vision in the flames in this scene. And there's a moment where the dress appears to somewhat vanish when the flame representation of her turns to the side. So are they sneaking in something? Again, is this similar to the 1988 Roger Rabbit debacle? Just throwing in little things that are just quick and you wouldn't really notice unless you looked with a fine-tooth comb. Now, moving out of the subliminal messages, let's talk about some myths here. There's a lot of crazy paranormal claims associated with Disney that I was not aware of. It's reported that there's a crying child in the haunted mansion. It's rumored that a mother visited the mansion and distributed her son's ashes throughout the mansion. And you know what? This is just out of control. This is like some Disney adult shit where people are just too locked into the magic and wonder of Disney to the point where this lady's taking her dead son's ashes and sprinkling them around the haunted mansion. And I want you to keep this in mind for later. Take this little story of this ghost crying child, put it in your back pocket, because later we're going to talk about this. And apparently it's not that uncommon for people to sprinkle dead people's ashes at Disney. Disney adults are out of control. I don't even know what's going on anymore. There's another claim of an old crutched man. It's claimed that an old man occasionally will board the ride, but he disappears by the end. And some allege that this old man is an apparition from an aircraft that crashed that happened near the haunted mansion before its construction. So apparently there's some kind of paranormal apparition that occasionally gets on the ride. People think he is just another guest of the park, but he vanishes by the end of the ride. That's another rumor that I found out here. Another weird one, there's this paranormal event associated with someone called Mr. One Way. Now, there's a person who was alleged to sneak into Space Mountain's maintenance area in an attempt to ride the attraction alone, but he never came out. So some claim to have seen this man. They call him Mr. One Way, and some people claim that this apparition actually has sat next to them on the ride, but he vanishes before the end. Now, I don't understand what the name Mr. One Way is. I'm assuming it's because he went in but never came out. But I also like to think of Mr. One Way as just the worst driver of all time. Like, if you're driving with him and trying to go somewhere, and you're like, hey, actually, this way's shorter. We should take that turn. This is a quicker way to get to our destination. And he's just like, I only go one way. That's what I like to think about Mr. One Way. But this is, again, another apparition rumored to be at the park. At Autotopia, there's claimed laughter that no one knows where it's coming from. Cast members, which, by the way, at Disney parks, everyone who works there is called a cast member. They're not called employees or staff. They're a part of the cast because they're making everything magical and wonderful. It's alleged by cast members that they hear this laughter after the park closes in Autotopia, and it's rumored that a family burned alive in a tragic fire on site, and that the spirits of the children who burned to death haunt the place. That's the claim. Now, here's the thing that I find interesting. The family burned alive in this urban legend. So why aren't the parents haunting? Why is it just the ghost kids screaming? Like, can't the ghost parents just get the kids under fucking control and deal with it? Just because you're dead doesn't mean you can go full Disney adult and neglect your children. That's my take. Now, there's a lady in white. There's a 19th to 20th century woman that's claimed to roam the park after it closes. And she's rumored to have died in an accident, and she never speaks. So she's kind of my kind of woman, right? You know, that sounds pretty dope. I can get behind that one. Now, apparently, obviously, I'm joking. Apparently, this 19th century woman ghost also guides lost children to the baby care center. And again, I just want to point this out. Why are all these kids going missing at Disney? I don't mean to hate on the Disney adults. You know, I told them not to listen to this episode. But if you are listening to this episode, y'all need to stop neglecting your kids. You need to make sure your offspring isn't getting lost at Disney World. It's crazy. It's like, oh my God, it's fucking Mickey Mouse. Oh my God. And their kids are just going missing because they're fixated on this children's character. Public service announcement. Maybe we can sort that one out a little bit. I don't know. Walt Disney's ghost, obviously, is also claimed to be witnessed walking around Disney parks. What's interesting about this one, I did come across a video of a blurry apparition-like thing moving around in security footage on the park. And it really does legitimately look like a ghost. It's this like invisible human-shaped blur that moves down a sidewalk and I believe exits one of the gates. That one is pretty weird. I don't know what's going on with that, but this is what some people are claiming. There's a lot of paranormal things associated with Disney. Obviously myths, urban legends, but very interesting nonetheless. Now, this might be one of my favorite parts of this section. Let's talk about some of the conspiracies associated with the park. And some of these are real, some of these aren't. But the first one, this is actually a true event that was going on. Apparently, at Disney, these cast members had to share underwear. More accurately, I should say undergarments, but it's more funny to say underwear. I need to tell you all about something insane. There's a valley in Canada where over 30 people died under impossible circumstances, many of which were found with their heads completely severed and never recovered. One guy froze solid with a matchbox in hand, about to light a fire, like he froze instantly. A woman was spotted running naked through the forest for 13 days, mysteriously grinning, then vanished forever. On Patreon, I break down the full story of the mysterious Nahanni Valley of headless men. Every theory, from the bear dog hybrid, the tropical oasis in freezing Canada, and what might actually be behind the decapitations. This episode is only at patreon.com/the Swerve podcast, plus access an archive full of premium full-length bonus episodes. I highly recommend joining us over there. It is definitely worth it. What happened here was apparently Disney used to launder undergarments for the cast members instead of having these people take their own individual garments home and launder the garments themselves. They had to share group underwear, basically. Disney would issue communal jock straps and tights and bike shorts, and the cast members were to turn in the garments at the end of their shift. Then Disney would wash the garments, and then the cast members would pick up a new set on their next shift. This was the system at the time. According to the LA Times, workers were complaining about contracting pubic lice scabies or receiving stained or smelly garments. You know, this is what the staff is complaining about. This is crazy. I can't believe, can you imagine how nasty your coworkers are? That this is what you have to deal with. You just get fucking scabies because one of your nasty ass cast members. Oh God, it's just crazy. Now I have a quote from the LA Times article. This is what it read, quote, "People are feeling nauseous. They have itchy eyes, are dizzy, and have headaches," end quote. This is what's happening to people because they're wearing shared underwear with their coworkers. Since 2001, at least from what I could find based on this article, I think the workers are issued their own individual garments to take care of. So that issue has been solved 24 years ago at this point. But for a long period of time, there was communal jock straps and people were feeling nauseous and getting scabies. Welcome to the most magical land of wonder, or whatever the fuck Disney says. That's wild. Okay, this next one, this is more of an urban legend, but there's claims that the big turkey legs you can get at Disney, which I'm not sure if anybody has seen this, but you can see videos of people getting these huge ass legs of meat. They're just massive turkey legs. And it's claimed that these are actually emu legs, that Disney's collecting emus and sacrificing them to Satan or something. I don't know what Disney's doing, but they get these legs and they're huge and it's crazy. But here's the thing. When I looked into this claim, the turkey legs are so massive because they come from male turkeys. Tom turkeys is what they're called. It's a male turkey, tom turkey. Most people are accustomed to turkey during Thanksgiving, and these are typically female turkeys, the hens. So this is why there's this discrepancy, because when you do get a turkey leg from a tom turkey, it's a big fucking leg. And also I want to mention that mislabeling meat is illegal. So I really don't think that it's emu legs, but it's really funny nonetheless to think so, because they are really huge if you look at videos of people eating, which is something that I actually researched, which is kind of cringe. Next, there's a stray cat army on site. This is not an urban legend. This is true. But here's the thing. They're not necessarily strays. Well, they are strays, but they do have full medical and free housing on site, and they're used as pest control. Does that make sense? So they actually are feral cats. They're not owned by a human, but they have their own area. And obviously Disney will render medical care if that's needed. At Disneyland, there's about 200 feral cats. And the feral cats, this is funny, they're also considered cast members. I just find that hilarious that you can be a feral cat and be employed at Disney. This is more of a conspiracy, but it's probably true to some extent. We don't really have proof of any of this next one. But the idea of manipulated wait times and purposeful mental exhaustion. So there's some users on Reddit that lament that Disney uses mental exhaustion as a tactic to increase sales. So for instance, you go to Disney, one of the theme parks, there's a high entry fee at the gate. So once you're in, you've already dropped, $500 or whatever it is. I don't know the exact price. I know it's very expensive. And you're like, okay, now I got to wait an hour to go on these rides. So if we're only here for 5-6 hours or whatever, I don't know how long people spend at Disney. Like, I don't know. You're only going to do like 5 things, right? Or whatever it is. So then you're like, okay, I should get the Genie Plus because it's only a little bit extra. So you buy that so that you get reduced wait times. But then you find out that there's nowhere to sit. So you're forced on your feet and to keep moving the entire day. So you're burning precious calories. So then you have to go buy drinks and you have to consume Disney food. And there's just nowhere to relax. So it's like this mental exhaustion that you just keep spending and spending. And you can't even sit down. I didn't even know that was a thing. Is that true? Is that real? Have people been there? Can you not sit? I haven't been, so I don't know. And I'm never going. Now, furthermore, the wait times are alleged to be purposefully manipulated. And I can get behind this. This is probably true, even if maybe it's not admitted officially. People claim that this is a method for crowd control. So Disney will inflate the wait times so that guests are discouraged and start looking elsewhere because they don't want to waste their time. So this enables better distribution of guests around the park. It's also honestly probably a tactic for satisfying guests, because you're not over promising. You're like, okay, this is a 60-minute wait time here. If you do wait in that line and not fall victim to the psyop, and it's only 25 minutes, you're pretty stoked on that. You're like, oh, I thought it was an hour, but it was only 25. So these are 2 conspiracies, but I think there's probably some truth to those. That just makes sense. Now, here's another conspiracy. This one's pretty wild. The silencing of Snow White. So it's alleged that Adriana Caslotti, she's the voice of the original Snow White character. It's claimed that she was backlisted from doing further film, TV, and radio work for the rest of her career. This is the claim. I don't know for sure. You would assume that having such an iconic role that was a huge smash hit would have opened doors for this actress. But here's what's funny. She wasn't even credited in the 1937 film. Now, some allege that Disney placed her under a contract and never gave her further work. So what exactly is going on with this one? I'm not 100% sure, but this is the claim that Disney blacklisted one of their iconic actors because they didn't want her voice getting around to other media formats. Is that a thing? Is that something that can be signed? That seems like actually maybe that is a thing. Like if you have a certain voice, are you under contract to only use that voice in certain pieces of work? Right? Like iconic voices. That's an interesting thing. I've never thought about that before until just now. I don't know. Let me know, listeners. If you know, drop a comment. Tell me what's going on here. Now, here's another. This is a crazy one. This one is true, but it's blown out of proportion. There's actually secret underground tunnel systems at Disney. Now, people claim this is where the alleged content comes, that some of these secret underground tunnel systems are used for abducting children, and this might explain some of the missing children at Disney parks. But in reality, when I looked into this, these tunnels, they're not really a secret, although in 1 second you'll see it is kind of strange. They're mostly utility corridors, and they're used for transporting stuff. So merch, cast members, they're on garbage routes, things like this. This is what these underground tunnel systems, or really just utility corridors, are used for. But what's interesting about this, I did come across a viral TikTok video, and it showed a secret passageway that opened out of the floor after the person filming the video pressed a button on a wall. Literally, this floor that you would not know was an entranceway unless you knew. It really does look secret and hidden. This floor literally retracted, and then it reveals a wooden fucking staircase that leads deep into the ground. So that's kind of strange. That kind of sounds like a secret entrance to a secret underground tunnel system. That one I found very interesting. And in that viral video, it was like a robot voice talking about things, stuff like that. So we'll take that with a grain of salt, but that is interesting. Now, another conspiracy with Disney is that Disney controls copyright law. Is this true? Well, actually, there's somewhat of a line of truth with this one, or a thread of truth. In order to keep Mickey Mouse out of the public domain, Disney has lobbied Congress successfully for decades to extend time limits on copyright protections. This is often referred to in jest as the Mickey Mouse Protection Act. Now, fun fact, when I was looking into this, so Disney does lobby Congress successfully, and they do pour millions of dollars into doing this, into protecting their copyright. But on January 1st of 2024, there's a version of Mickey Mouse that actually entered the United States public domain after almost a century of being protected behind copyright law. So not Mickey Mouse as we know Mickey Mouse, but one of the early versions of Mickey Mouse on a steamboat. Apparently that's public domain. So I could use it for the cover art. Disney can't do shit. But the other Mickeys, they are still behind copyright, apparently. I did kind of allude to this earlier in the episode, but I wanted to mention this here in the conspiracy section. It's claimed, and I think this is true, I think there's a thread of truth here as well, that many people spread ashes around the fucking park. I found a highly upvoted Reddit post that mentioned that one of the biggest things Disney security is doing is they have to remain vigilant about people smuggling in dead people's ashes to sprinkle and spread around the park. Apparently, this is actually a threat that people are looking out for, that staff are looking out for at the park. This is just, you can't even make this shit up. Apparently, dumping dead people's burned bodies into the water of the Pirates of the Caribbean is one of the most popular drop-off locations at the park. So if you're near the Pirates of the Caribbean exhibit, watch out. There's probably dead people's remains in the area, allegedly. And I also found a former employee of Disney that validated this claim. They were saying that sometimes the cleaners would come with hazmat suits and vacuum out the ashes that were left at the Haunted Mansion. So if you will recall, there is that crying child apparition that is claimed to be at the Haunted Mansion. Apparently, people actually do spread ashes in these areas. It's crazy. Here's another crazy thing. This is a little tidbit, a little side tangent here. When I was researching what was going on here, someone else on Reddit responded, quote, "Cremations aren't considered hazardous waste. It's just carbonized bone that's been ground down to dust," end quote. So apparently some people don't even see a problem with this. They're just like, oh yeah, like it's just dust now. Like what's the problem? And to me, that's fucking sane. If you're going around spreading ashes at Disney, you need to stop. You need help. That's my point. That's my opinion. That's my opinion. And again, it just goes to show like Disney adults are out of control. They're literally spreading dead people around the land of magic and wonder. Like what's going on here? Now, finally, this is probably one of the most famous conspiracies associated with Disney, Walt Disney's head being frozen. It's widely speculated on the internet that Walt Disney froze his body or even removed his head and froze it after his death on December 15th in 1966. There are many rumors that claim Walt Disney is cryogenically stored in a deep freeze on the park. And here's the kicker. Where people think that he is stored is under the Pirates of the Caribbean attraction. So you have all these people dumping the remains of dead bodies into the water in this location. And it also happens to be the alleged location of Walt Disney's cryogenically stored frozen body in a deep freeze. You know, if all that stuff was true, if it was verified and not just urban legend, that's some simulation shit. That's hilarious. That's so hilariously sick. So I want to mention, though, when I looked further into these claims, it does appear to be completely discredited. There's no real evidence that Walt Disney is cryogenically stored in a deep freeze. This came from a book written by Mark Elliott in 1993 called Walt Disney, Hollywood's Dark Prince. But this book has been extensively discredited. Many of the claims in it have been dismissed. And also when I looked into this, Disney's death certificate, Walt Disney's death certificate, indicates he was cremated 2 days after his death. So I find that hilarious. And what I find even more funny about that, wouldn't that be hilarious if his ashes were just sprinkled around the waters of the Pirates of the Caribbean and there's actually some truth to all of this? Oh, that would be fun. Darkly fun. To summarize this section, it's obvious, you know, when you look a little bit into things, Disney's kind of out of fucking control. You know, some of the subliminal stuff, you know, you could argue it's a reach, but there's also some stuff that seems pretty blatant and is crazy. Now, we talked about the myths, the legends, the notable conspiracies, some false, some true, many with a grain of salt. But here's the thing. We are only scratching the surface of this iceberg. In the next section, we'll be diving deeper and discussing some truly horrifying shit. Okay, so we know that Disney has long been synonymous with childhood magic and whimsical tales, but is this true? Are you aware that Disney based most of its most iconic stories on grim folklore and disturbing fables that feature mutilation, people burning to death, sadistic punishments, gruesome, brutal deaths, and other horrifying themes? Beneath the surface of our beloved animated classics lies a much darker truth. Let's explore the original stories that Disney stole from. Here, fairy tales meet fatality. All right, so in this section, I would like to go through some of the horrific origin stories that many of the most famous, iconic Disney films are based on. And let's start with The Little Mermaid. This is going to be pretty wild if you're unfamiliar with these origin stories. The Little Mermaid was actually written by a Danish author, Hans Christian Andersen, and he wrote the original fairy tale of The Little Mermaid that Disney has based their film on. A little fun fact, sometimes it's translated as The Little Sea Maid instead of The Little Mermaid. And this was originally published all the way back in 1837 as a children's fairy tale. Now, there's some notable dark story elements with the original. Let's go through these. In the original fairy tale, Ariel's transformation into a mermaid causes her brutal, agonizing pain when it occurs. That's part of the deal. She becomes this mermaid, but in exchange, part of the deal is that she will always feel this brutal, agonizing pain. It will feel like she has constant, sharp knives in her feet when she's using her legs. That's how bad this pain is. Furthermore, the pain of losing her tail will never leave her. That's what the story says. This is so funny. In the original fairy tale, the prince loves watching her dance, and she just dances, and she's just in agonizing misery the entire time. And the prince is like, just keep dancing for me. Dance for me. I love watching it. But little does he know, because she can't even talk right either. She's just in agonizing pain. It feels like knives are stabbing through her feet, but she must dance. What's also hilarious, in the original fairy tale, after the prince meets Ariel and they spend a little bit of time together, where does Ariel go? Does she get to stay with the prince? Does she go into the bed of the prince? No, the prince allows her to sleep outside his bedroom on the floor. That's some crazy shit. So he meets this girl, he really likes her, and she's like, hey, I'm going to come home with you. But she sleeps on the floor outside the bedroom in agonizing pain. The prince also, as we know in the story, he marries someone else and Ariel's heart is broken. But in the original, the sea witch offers Ariel a deal. She can kill the prince and she will turn back into a mermaid and she can live. But she must kill him with a special dagger and have his blood drip on her feet. So as long as she goes and slays the prince and, splats his fucking blood all over her agonizing pain feet, things are fine. She can go back to being a mermaid. And that's like some crazy Aleister Crowley, like foot fetish shit. I don't know what's going on there, but that's the original deal. What happens instead, Ariel sacrifices herself into the sea, becoming sea foam forever. Now, in the original story, mermaids live much longer than humans. They live to be about 300 years old, kind of like a turtle. But humans have a soul that lives on after death. Mermaids don't get that, though. They live longer, but when they die, they are turned into sea foam, and no part of them remains in existence at all. That's some dark shit. That's in the original. Mermaids don't go to heaven. They become sea foam and cease to exist. Let's talk about Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. This is also very gruesome. Disney's film is adapted from a German fairy tale in the Brothers Grimm collection, which was published in 1812. I want to mention a lot of great famous stories actually come out of the Brothers Grimm collection. So you'll see this referenced multiple times as we move through these different stories. The Brothers Grimm, these were two brothers, Jacob and Wilhelm, that were German academics, and they published many famous folk tales. Some notable dark elements to the original story. The evil queen sends out a huntsman to kill Snow White, but she demands that he bring her back Snow White's lungs and liver so that she can consume the organs with salt. That's some wild shit. This cannibal. Go kill her. Oh, and by the way, don't just kill her. Make sure you give me the fucking organs because I'm going to put a little salt on that later and consume her. You know, that's where this story's coming from. Now, what's interesting, the huntsman, he does spare Snow White, and he does instead bring back the lungs and liver of a boar. But I just find that request wild. It's like some Hannibal Lecter shit. I'm on carnivore diet, putting salt on shit. It's crazy. Furthermore, the prince, this is just disturbing, just like some obsessive shit. In the original, the prince is so obsessed with Snow White that when he finds her laying in a coffin, he's just like, oh, I love this chick. I'm going to fall in love, but I'm just going to carry the coffin wherever I go. Like I need to go to the market. I'm bringing the coffin with me. I need to go use the bathroom. I'm bringing the coffin with me. He's just carrying around a coffin. And you know, maybe to some people, that's what true love looks like. Carrying the coffin of your significant other wherever you go. To me, it's very hardcore simp energy coming from the original Brothers Grimm tale. But also in the original, the evil queen at the end, she's made to dance in a pair of red hot iron slippers until she dies. She dances till she dies. That's some like upside down world Footloose shit. She must dance, but she will die. That's from the original. Let's talk about Cinderella. The first literary European version of the story was published in 1634 by Guillaume Battista Basili. 1634. Did you know it was that old of a story? I certainly didn't before I looked into it. Now, the version most widely known by English speakers was published in French by Charles Perrault. The Brothers Grimm published a version of the Cinderella story as well in 1812. So there's different versions of this story, but the original was from 1634. Some notable dark elements from the original, there's a number of ones in this one. Funny enough, I find this one just hilarious. In the main story that was translated by that French guy that the English-speaking audience would be aware of, Cinderella, she's actually just referred to as Ash Fool. That's literally what they call her. They call her Ash Fool. I find that hilarious. If you know someone with the name Ash in their name, just call them Ash Fool. It's really funny. Like an Ashley, you're Ash Fool now. Ashlyn, Ash Fool. You could do whatever you want with that. That's fun. When the prince is going through the kingdom to find the girl whose foot will fit the glass slipper, one of the stepsisters cuts her fucking toes off to try fit her fat, ugly foot in the slipper. Let that sink in. She wants to be inserted into the royal aristocracy so much that when the prince comes around looking for who will fit the slipper, she cuts her toes off. Her sister does the same thing, except when she tries to fit her foot to the glass slipper, she cuts her heel off. And funny enough, here's what's more disturbing about this entire endeavor. As these stepsisters' bleeding feet are trying to fit into a glass slipper, guess who informed them to do so? The stepsister's mother advised them to do such tactics. She's like, hey, bitch, we got to get out of this. We got to get out of the poverty, and the only way we're going to do it is if you cut your fucking toes off and you cut your heel off and get your foot in that fucking slipper. We got to get out of here. When the prince comes back a third time to try the slipper, the man that answers the door, this is Cinderella's father, or Ash Fool's father, rather, he says that his dead wife left a dirty little Cinderella in the house and that she is too filthy to be seen. So someone comes around asking for Cinderella, who they refer to as Ash Fool in this story. And instead of just bringing her to the door, he calls her dirty and too filthy to be seen. What a great father. Now, at the wedding, This is later after everything's been sorted. We're moving towards a happy ending. 2 of Cinderella's doves, this is at the wedding. Her stepsisters are bridesmaids at this wedding. But 2 of Cinderella's doves attack the bridesmaids, the stepsisters, and they peck one eye out of each of the stepsisters' skulls. They complete the wedding. This is the thing. The wedding isn't stopped. The wedding resumes with these women's eyes pecked out of their fucking skull. And they get married and it's all happy. But at the end of the wedding, the doves come back and they peck the remaining eye out of each of the stepsisters, leaving them completely blind. And isn't that a happy ending? Let's move on and talk about Sleeping Beauty. This is an incredibly famous story, as are the other ones, obviously. But the earliest version of this story is from a French narrative called Pierce Forest, which was written somewhere between 1330 and 1334. So this is even older than Cinderella by like 600 years. This also appears in the Brothers Grimm collection that was published in 1812 as well. But originally, this is super old. I can't believe how old this is. Now, some notable dark elements to this original story. Sleeping Beauty becomes unconscious after having pricked her finger and fallen to sleep. She's placed on a velvet throne, and her father just abandons her forever. He's like, shit, she fell asleep. So he just throws her on this velvet throne and just leaves her forever, never to be seen again. This is even getting more crazy here. This is wild. Brace yourselves. A king walking by the house Sleeping Beauty was abandoned in by her father goes inside and finds the girl alive but unconscious. So what does he do? He fucking her. Not only that, Sleeping Beauty then becomes pregnant and sires 2 twin children in her unconscious state. Out of control. Even more out of control, the kids are birthed while she's unconscious. And one of the twins is the reason she actually wakes up. So this is wild. But what happens next, the king comes back and he finds that Sleeping Beauty is now awake and she has these 2 twin kids. And what's wild, she obviously doesn't know what has happened. He just explains what happened. And he's like, yeah, I just saw you unconscious. So I just raped you. And that's why you have 2 kids. And that's why I'm back. And what's more disturbing, they bond over that and connect. What? Now she's like in love with the king. Very dark, twisted, 1300s. Disney basing the story on this. Now, Sleeping Beauty, she actually wants to marry the king now. But here's the thing. He actually has a relationship with the queen already. So we have some Jerry Springer shit going on. I can't even imagine what the title to this would be. I just don't even know. I'm not even going there, but this is wild. So what happens next? The queen learns of Sleeping Beauty as the king is muttering random shit as he's sleeping in the same bed as the queen. So the queen, she's now suspicious. He's siring kids with some bitch named Sleeping Beauty. So the queen orders that the 2 children be abducted, cooked, and then fed to the king. This is just out of control. So first of all, in the 1300s, like, men are out of control. This guy's finding an unconscious woman, and he's like, yeah, I'm just gonna do that. But also women are fucking tripping. She's like, as he's eating the meat later, which we'll talk about in a second, she's saying, quote, "Did you enjoy the meat I cooked for you, honey? Oh, good. End quote. It's like, reminds me of that episode of The View when all the hosts are just like cackling about how they would chop the dicks off their cheating spouses. And it's just like next level revenge plots. And everyone's just like, oh my God, this is like that, but in the 1300s. You cheated on me, so let's find the kids. Let's first abduct them. And then not only that, let's not just kill them, let's cook them, and then let's feed them back to you. That's my revenge plot. 1300s are out of control. Now, luckily, the queen fails to convince the chef to do such acts. So the chef goes behind her back and cooks 2 lamb instead and just lies about it. But definitely the queen totally thinks the king is eating the kids. As I said, she's like, quote, eat, eat. You are eating your own. End quote. As the king is eating the lambs. To put a bow on this story, the king later finds out about the queen and what she had intended. So he burns her alive. This is how the story ends. One of the wildest stories. What an arc that you go through. There's really nothing. It's got childhood abandonment. It has a rape scene. It has like a delusion where somehow she bonds over that. It has the queen being out of control, trying to cook children and feed them to the king because he cheated on her. And then finally, the king burns her alive. And they lived happily ever after. Let's talk about Pinocchio. Pinocchio, this was originally written in 1883 by an Italian writer named Carlo Collodi. In the original Pinocchio, he's kind of a little shit. He's described as being mischievous, a disgrace, and a wretched boy. If you look up some of these old drawings that this Italian writer did of Pinocchio, he really, like Pinocchio, looks like a balding middle-aged dude with no clothes on. He's just like this old bald man made of wood, and the wood's just exposed, and he's got these weird, thin, anorexic twig arms and legs. The image is quite disturbing already. In these old stories of Pinocchio, you all remember Jiminy Cricket from the Disney version. Well, in the original, Pinocchio kills Jiminy Cricket with a mallet after the cricket attempted to give him advice. All he was trying to do, he's like, hey, Pinocchio, I think you should try this. So what does Pinocchio do? Beats him to death with a mallet. One of the weirdest parts of this old Pinocchio story, when I was looking into it, is that he's continually tortured for his bad behavior throughout. He falls asleep on the stove, and when he wakes up, his feet are burned off. Now, what's interesting, Geppetto does make him new feet after he returns from prison. So Geppetto is like in jail and Pinocchio's feet are being burned off. It's pretty wild. Another thing that's crazy, Pinocchio is almost eaten alive when a fisherman tries to fry him up. He's just going around being mischievous and someone tries to eat him alive. Furthermore, Pinocchio, he's almost burned alive as a hungry man wanted to use him as firewood. This is also part of the Disney film, but Pinocchio is transformed into a donkey and thrown in the sea in the original story as well. But what's kind of interesting, this is kind of probably the most gruesome of the Pinocchio tale. In the story, Pinocchio has enemies. He has these two enemies. One of them is a fox and the other one is a cat. His enemies, they actually attempt to stab Pinocchio to death, but because he's made of wood, the knife wounds and stabs aren't killing him. So they're like, shit, we got to figure out something better. We can't stab him to death. This is a fox and a cat we're talking about. Pinocchio ends. This is the story. The Pinocchio story ends with the puppet boy being bound and tied up by the fox and the cat. And then they put a noose around his throat. And Pinocchio's enemies hang him from an oak tree. I have a quote from the original writing. Quote, a tempest northerly wind began to blow and roar angrily, and it beat the poor puppet from side to side, making him swing violently, like the clatter of a bell ringing for a wedding. And the swinging gave him atrocious spasms. His breath failed him, and he could say no more. He shut his eyes, opened his mouth, stretched his legs, gave a long shudder, and hung stiff and insensible. End quote. So, another happy ending to an original fairy tale. Now, what's the moral here? These are all children's stories from the past. Are kids just too soft today? Are the originals maybe what? Is there more merit to the originals? I don't know. You let me know what you think. You do know the real stories now, or at least some of them, instead of these bastardized versions from Disney. If you have any nieces, nephews, children of your own, you can tell them the stories like they were meant to be told. This is how they were intended. Now, it's pretty crazy. This is where all these family-friendly tales originate from. I find the juxtaposition of the two out of control. In the next section, we're going to be getting into the depths of the iceberg. So get ready for some of the craziest, darkest, and most deranged Disney darkness I could find. So, in this section, the famous phrase, "no one dies at Disney," is going to be completely shattered. People do die at Disney. And not only that, their deaths are some of the most brutal and gruesome ways to die I have ever come across. Further, we will dive into the unsettling sex trafficking and child abuse crimes associated with Disney staff and reveal some of Disney's darkest secrets, including collaborating with former Nazis and allegedly colluding with the FBI. So let's start with the Disney deaths. We're here. We're at the bottom of the iceberg. I would like to give a reminder disclaimer. This section is going to be dealing with some of the darkest content in the whole episode. So if you're sensitive to these things, I would recommend skipping this. I will mention we're not going to be covering all the deaths at Disney, but I will be going through some of them so you can get a horrifying taste for the darkness associated with Disney. Let's start with the death of Debbie Stone. Deborah Gale Stone was an 18-year-old cast member of Disneyland at the American Sings attraction. She suffered one of the worst imaginable deaths at the happiest place on earth in 1974. She had just graduated from high school and was working the job to save money for college. Now, the America Sings attraction, this is a rotating theater in which the audience views singing animatronic figures. Just 9 days after the attraction was opened, Debbie was brutally crushed between a rotating theater wall and a stationary stage wall. Screams were heard, but Patreons assumed that the screams were a part of the attraction. There was one eyewitness that said he had seen what he thought was a child being dragged between two walls. One of the worst, most gruesome ways to die is being crushed between two surfaces. And this is what happened here with Debbie Stone's death. It's a very gruesome one. And there's not a lot of knowledge on what exactly happened. No one really knows. It was kind of her job to greet people. She wasn't even really on the stage, but somehow she, while this device rotates counterclockwise, was stuck between these two walls and crushed to death. It's very tragic. Disney closed down the attraction and did an investigation to figure out what happened. They weren't really able to figure out exactly what happened. But here's something fucking crazy. They reopened the attraction only 3 days later. To me, that speaks a lot. You open this thing, and within 9 days, your staff member is crushed to fucking death. And after you investigate, 72 hours later, the attraction is open. To me, that speaks volumes. We'll save that for final thoughts, but that's pretty wild. Let's talk about the Matterhorn bobsled enthusiasts that were slayed by this attraction. On January 3rd, 1984, Regina Dolly Young was killed by a speeding bobsled on the Matterhorn bobsled ride. She was 48 years old. Now, what happened here, she had fallen out of the rear end of the bobsled about halfway down the track, and she was still on the track. She's attempting to get up as she's somehow released from the bobsled. She's on the track, pushing herself up, but she gets swiped and run over by another oncoming bobsled. Insane. What's crazy, this ride is only 90 seconds long, and they find that her belt was unbuckled when they go examine the bobsled that she flew out of. I have a quote from one of the articles that I sourced this from, and this is a quote from Dolly's son's wife, Kathy, and this is what she remarked. Quote, "Nobody from Disney ever called to tell us they were even sorry it happened there." End quote. So this lady is sideswiped by a bobsled from one of Disney's attractions, and they can't even make a phone call. They can't even make a phone call being like, hey, we're sorry this happened. To me, that's also pretty, I don't know, that just doesn't sit well with me. I don't know what you guys think. Let me know what you think in the end. We'll get to final thoughts. I'll tie some of this together there. But I also want to make a note. on this Matterhorn bobsled ride, she was actually the second death. She wasn't even the first death. The first death happened in May of 1964 and was actually the first fatality at the park, period. That was the first death, was on this sleigh ride, and she was the second. The first death was a 15-year-old Mark Maples. He stood up and fell out of the ride, and he fractured his skull, broke several ribs, and bled internally. He died 3 days later at the hospital. So technically, he didn't die at Disney. He died off-site. And I'll talk a little bit about, there's a little weird thing, a little weird rumor about Disney that might tie into that. So keep that in your back pocket for a second. I want to talk about the People Mover deaths next. This is a wild one to me because the People Mover is a very mild ride. It's not fast moving. It moves at 7 miles per hour, and its only intention is to simply move guests throughout the park. That's all it's doing. It's not crazy. It's not spinning. It's not flipping. It's just something you get on so you don't have to walk. 2 people, they were slain by this seemingly innocuous ride. In August of 1967, 17-year-old Ricky Lee Yama tried to jump between People Mover cars and was crushed to death. Very, very wild. In June of 1980, 18-year-old Gerardo Gonzalez tried to climb between People Mover cars and was ground up by the wheels of the ride as it moved forward. Very dark. And what a way to go, right? This thing is moving so slowly, and just at the wrong time, you try hop between rides, crushed to death between them. You slip as you're trying to jump between the 2 carts, and you're slow moving, right? People do this stuff all the time, and you're ground up underneath the ride. Very dark, very Disney. Let's move on to this next one. I wanted to include this one just because it's so fucking dark. Did you know? Okay, let's just go through this one. In June 2016, a 2-year-old boy was pulled into a lagoon and killed by an alligator near a Walt Disney World hotel. He wandered into only about 1 foot of water, and he was snatched between a gator's jaws. Both the father and the mother are freaking out at this point, obviously. They attack the alligator, and they're trying to pry the alligator's closed mouth open, frantically prying at the alligator's mouth, trying to save their son, but the alligator was too powerful and it dragged the boy under into the depths despite their best efforts. Now, there was a search that occurred immediately, and to Disney's credit, they did include Disney boats, so Disney's also helping with the search, and they also did close all the beaches in the resort area, closing them out of caution because there's a fucking alligator ripping people into the depths. The body of the child is recovered the next day, but he was deceased. Most likely drowned to death when the alligator pulled him under, but it's a tragic story. Now, interesting, I have a little note here to put some context to this story. Apparently, only 23 people since 1973 have been killed by alligators in Florida. So we're talking a 50-year period of time. Well, I guess at this point, it would be more close to 40-year period of time. Only 23 people were killed. So this is a very rare and tragic event that this just happened to happen near or at a Disney World hotel. And the resort has those areas that people can go to. It's very tragic. I want to talk next about a monorail death. In June of 1966, 19-year-old Thomas Cleveland snuck into the park and was walking on the tracks of the monorail. So he just breaks into the park or snuck into the park. I don't necessarily think he broke into the park. I believe this had to do with one of their grad nights. So he just maybe snuck into an area of the park, but he was already on site for this grad night, something like that. There's a train system on the site, this monorail, that they use to move guests from the hotel to the park. And he's just walking on the tracks. Now, a security guard sees Thomas on the tracks and he yells to warn him that the monorail is coming. For whatever reason, Thomas doesn't hear the security guard's warning. The monorail collides with Thomas and forces him underneath of it, grinding his body to death under its immense weight and dragging him for 40 feet along the track before halting, dragged to hell by a monorail. Just a very, very tragic death. It's something crazy about being pulled under something and being crushed and ground to death is just particularly disturbing. This next one is crazy. This is one you would never have expected. And the chances that this even occurred at Disney or one of Disney's theme parks at all, the chances of it happening are just so rare. But this actually did happen. Let's talk about a brain-eating amoeba. At Disney's River Country Water Park, there was an 11-year-old boy that was infected with an extremely rare brain-eating amoeba called Naegleria fowleri. This pathogen is found in warm and hot freshwater systems. That's the environment it thrives in. What's crazy about this pathogen, Naegleria fowleri, it consumes astrocytes and neurons. So these are both cells found in the brain, and this is what the pathogen likes. It likes consuming astrocytes and neurons. What's also crazy about this pathogen, the initial symptoms are pretty mild. They're just simply flu-like symptoms, but within 14 days, an infected person is dead. The fatality rate is greater than 97% despite all available treatments. That's what's so crazy about this. You think you're just coming down with like a flu, a fever, and within days you're gone and there's nothing anybody can do. It's extremely treatment resistant, probably because it's so rare that no one knows exactly what's going to work. They just use other treatments for similar pathogens and hope that they have some effect. This particular pathogen, there are only 381 cases reported globally. In the entire world, there's less than 400 of these cases that have ever been reported. And one of them occurred at Disney, the happiest place on earth. What are the chances of that? I want to make a note here. This is just like a public service announcement, I guess. I mean, this is extremely rare. This is like one of the rarest diseases you could possibly get. But apparently, you can prevent infection by not putting your head underwater when you're in warm water environments, or you can wear a nose clip. The reason it gets into the brain is through the nasal cavity. So if you dunk your head underwater and the water happens to have this pathogen, it can literally distribute itself through your nasal cavity and get into your brain. That's a public service announcement. You're welcome. Now, River Country, they did not close after Disney was informed of the boy's death. The child dies from one of the rarest pathogens in the world, and they know it happened at Disney when he was at this water park, and they're like, you know what, we're not going to close. We think it's unlikely this is going to happen again. Again, this is one of those things, it speaks volumes. Actions speak louder than words. And what's more crazy about this whole thing, not only did they not close the park after being informed about the death, the park remained open for 21 more years. The only reason the park closed, not because there's this extremely deadly pathogen found in the waters of the park. The only fucking reason they closed was due to a lack of demand over time. That's it. That's why they closed. So there was literally a child that had their brain eaten from being infected at Disney, and they still remained open. Just, let that sink in. We're in Disney darkness. The subliminal stuff's fun. The conspiracy stuff's fun. But here we are. This is another crazy case. This isn't as gruesome as the other deaths that I've gone through, but it's just out of control. Let's go through this story here. There's this guy, Jeffrey Piccolo. Unfortunately, his wife, Dr. Kanakporn Tangsoon, died shortly after eating at a restaurant in Disney World due to a severe allergic reaction on October 5th, 2023. The couple had explicitly raised their concerns about Tang Swan's dietary restrictions and were ensured that there would be no issues. Now, 45 minutes later, Jeffrey was administering a fucking EpiPen to his wife, and they rushed her to a hospital, but she was not able to be saved. Jeffrey Piccolo, he ends up suing Disney. He alleges that the death was totally preventable if proper protocols had been followed. And I think that's a fair assessment, especially when they're so cautious about her dietary restrictions that they have to carry an EpiPen around just in case something happens. This is crazy. This is going to blow your minds. This is going to make some of you very angry. Disney sidestepped the lawsuit, and this was the reason. They were able to sidestep the lawsuit that Jeffrey Piccolo brought up about his dead wife because Jeffrey had signed up for a free 1-month trial membership of Disney Plus in 2019. That's 4 years before this allergic reaction even happened in 2023. Apparently, the agreement of the streaming service states that users must resolve disputes through arbitration as opposed to litigation. So what this means, a situation must be handled by a neutral third party instead of a formal court with a judge and a jury. That's apparently in the fine print when you're signing different things and different agreements with Disney. Now, to be fair to the story, further I looked into this, apparently the tickets they also bought, and I'm not saying this makes things right, I still think this is incredibly shallow and out of control, but apparently when you buy tickets for the theme park, they have that same agreement. So the same agreement was also made in 2023, not just with the Disney Plus account in 2019. Keep that in mind. You can be signing for a fucking free trial, and that could be used against you in, I guess it's not a court of law at this point, but it can be used against you. Now, I have a quote from Disney's legal team. This was a quote from one of their responses to all this. Quote, "We are deeply saddened by the family's loss and understand their grief. Given that this restaurant is neither owned nor operated by Disney, we are merely defending ourselves against the plaintiff's attorney's attempt to include us in the lawsuit against the restaurant." End quote. Disney also said that its, quote, "position in no way affects any wrongful death or other claims the plaintiff may have against the restaurant." End quote. So they're just kind of getting completely out of it, being like, hey, we don't have anything to do with this. This is totally the restaurant. We're out. What's crazy about this is if you're not angry already, this is going to make you definitely angry. Guess how much the widow, Jeffrey Piccolo, guess how much he was seeking in damages? This is the amount. The lawsuit was only for $50,000. All he wanted to do was basically cover funeral expenses. And Disney's like, you know what? There's this Disney Plus agreement and we don't have to go to court. And also it's the restaurant. We have nothing to do with any of this. And all this guy wants is to cover funeral costs, apparently. So I'm not sure exactly what's going on here. These are the allegations. These are the claims being made. But I thought this story was too crazy to not include in the episode. Let's move aside from the deaths. And I want to talk about some of the crimes that are associated with Disney. They don't necessarily all include Disney per se. It's a lot of Disney staff that are just fucking disgusting, that do heinous things. Let's talk about Disney and the child abuse cases that are associated with some of its staff. I found a 2014 CNN investigation. It was a 6-month-long investigation that concluded since 2006 to 2014 at the time of this investigation, a total of 35 Disney employees have been arrested on charges of child abuse crimes. This is including possession of CP, sex crimes involving minors, and or trying to meet minors. 35 employees. I want to make a note here, though. None of these cases involved minors actually at the Disney park. The criminals were simply Disney employees committing crimes elsewhere. They happened to work at Disney, though. Except 2 of the cases were involved with CP at work. Apparently, these people were downloading CP on Disney work computers. And that's how they were eventually found and arrested. According to the article, employees included security guards, costumers, a VIP tour guide in training, a gift shop employee, and maintenance workers. These are the types of people that were among the 35 that were arrested. Now, I have a quote here from the Polk County Sheriff Grady Judd, who was involved in some of these cases, and he explains that child predators choose the Magic Kingdom as a place of employment because, quote, "Wherever you find children, you'll find sexual predators. Most employees work at Disney because they want a good, stable job for a great company, but there is always a few that are there because they can see children. They can live in a child's world," end quote. It's crazy. You know, all these places, there's always this dark underbelly. Anytime you have a location that's meant for children, you have people trying to infiltrate it for nefarious purposes. It's very sad and disturbing. Now, on April 5th, 2012, there was an 11-year-old girl that was molested by a Disney employee in an elevator on a Disney Dream cruise ship. The incident appears to have been handled fucking terribly. The perpetrator was able to escape U.S. prosecution and was sent back to his home country of India. So they knew who this guy was. He admitted to what it was, and we'll go through the story in a second. But he's not prosecuted, and he's just in India now, all things considered. And people allege that Disney played a role in him being able to escape this prosecution, which will make sense in a second. The incident occurred while the ship was docked in Port Canaveral, Florida. The victim reported the incident immediately to authorities on the ship, but the ship pulls out of the dock. So instead of grounding the ship because a crime was committed and allowing U.S. authorities to deal with the situation, it's now left the port. And there was time for it to not leave. That's not an issue here in the story based on the article that I was reading. The Disney employee confessed to the crime 2 days later in the Bahamas. So they're pulled out of the port now, and he's actually confessed to the crime while they're in the Bahamas. The issue here is that if this had been handled in Florida, the perpetrator would have been sentenced to 25 years in prison because it's a felony. But in the hands of the Bahamas law enforcement, Disney arranged for the man to return to India. This is what the article is reading. This is the allegation. So they literally flew a sex offender back to India, and he was able to escape prosecution. When I did look further into this is kind of a weird story because allegedly the victim's guardian, who I believe was her grandmother, had decided to not pursue the matter further. But if it happened in Florida, they would have prosecuted this regardless. The guardian can't just be like, oh, I don't want to pursue things further. Because it happened in Florida, the U.S. would prosecute regardless. But in the Bahamas, this is a different story. So this is how he's able to get out to some extent as well. So the idea is if they were properly dealt with in Florida and they didn't dock away, authorities could have dealt with this, and this guy would be in jail right now. But he's not. This is a wild one. Disney staff being involved in a massive sex trafficking ring. Did you know that Disney employees were associated with the largest human trafficking sting operation in Polk County history? In September 2023, 3 Disney employees, a security guard, a custodian, and a training coordinator, and apparently one other man worked at a Disney hotel. They were among 219 people arrested in a week-long undercover human trafficking bust operation. So again, staff being involved in human trafficking. I believe in this case, this had nothing to do with minors. This was like prostitution type stuff. But here you go. They're a part of one of the most massive sting operations, and there's Disney employees being involved in that. Pretty wild, right? Because these people are working in a family-friendly area. There's children around, and here they are coordinating behind the scenes. Now, there's other employee crimes. There's a whole list you could go through. I just want to note one in particular because it's particularly egregious given the position of the criminal. The former vice president of Disney. This is the vice president of Disney. He was sentenced to 6 years in prison following an investigation that found him guilty of 4 counts of first-degree sexual abuse. So the vice president of Disney is going to prison over sexual abuse. I want to shift gears from these employee-associated crimes, and I want to talk about Disney directly for a moment. This is a recent event, and there's other lawsuits that could be talked about, but this is one that I wanted to talk about in this episode. In 2017, Disney settled a $100 million lawsuit. The company was making covert anti-poaching deals with its competitors. Now, what this means, this is in this anti-poaching lawsuit, these deals make it so employees can't move to a different company that might be offering them better competition. So if Disney's making these deals with its competitors, the employees, they kind of have to stick with Disney. And basically, it effectively allows Disney to keep their employees' wages as low as possible because competition is just being artificially removed from the labor marketplace, right? If you're trying to be an animator at a different company that wants to hire you for more pay because Disney has this secret deal with them, that is no longer an offer. Based on what I was reading, this was more or less used to keep animators and visual effects workers tied to Disney. And this was a $100 million lawsuit settled in 2017. So there's some, shady shit going on all over the place. This isn't an all-encompassing crimes associated with Disney segment. There are many more that we could discuss and go through. But what I want to talk about next is some of the darkest secrets associated with Disney. We've mentioned this a little bit already. This idea that nobody dies at Disney. It's been alleged and speculated that when someone collapses in the park, that Disney's staff will resuscitate or attempt resuscitation until the person is off of the property, where they will formally be declared dead. And this is hence this famous phrase, nobody dies at Disney. This is where this is coming from. This is the claim, but I do believe medical staff do indeed attempt resuscitation for long periods of time. So I'm not sure this claim is 100% accurate, right? The claim is basically saying Disney doesn't allow people to be declared dead on its property. They will do as much as they possibly can. Even if they are clearly dead already, they'll attempt resuscitation so that when they're off the property, that's where it is declared. I don't necessarily know if I agree with that. I just think that's staff doing their job, in my opinion. But this is the allegation. I just think most people are trying to save someone's life as opposed to saving Disney's image. Paramedics perform life-saving techniques until people reach the hospital anyway, even if it seems unlikely to succeed. Plus, we've already established in the previous sections that people actually do die at Disney, and it's some of the most gruesome, horrifying ways. So I'm not sure 100% if this is a dark secret, the nobody dies at Disney thing, or if this is just standard practice. But that is the claim. Now, this other one, though, there's some significant animal abuse allegations of Disney. There is, or rather was, a widely popularized myth that claimed lemmings commit suicide. This emerged from a 1958 Disney nature documentary called White Wilderness. In this film, the filmmakers literally drove the rodents off of a cliff to stage a scene of a mass lemming migration that ended with hundreds of lemmings leaping into the Arctic Ocean. What's crazy is this species of lemmings is not known to migrate and does not commit suicide. But this is kind of what the story was trying to put across. Now, what's very interesting, being Canadian, this was actually covered by the CBC. This is the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. This is Canada's state-sponsored media. And there's a program on CBC called The Fifth Estate, and they brought this to light first. They actually brought this animal cruelty to light in 1982, out of Canada, of all places, uncovering the Disney darkness. Disney basically just sewered the filmmaker and said that he acted alone without knowledge or approval from Disney. They're just like, yeah, we didn't have any part of that. That was all the filmmaker. That's what happened with that. This is another one. This one is also one of those ones that just makes you mad. There's this Spider-Man gravestone incident. I'm not sure if any of you have heard of this before, but reportedly, Disney did not allow Spider-Man to be etched into the gravestone of an English father's dead 4-year-old son's grave. The reasoning for the refusal was to preserve the innocence and magic of the company's characters. The child died of a rare genetic disorder, and he was a massive Spider-Man fan. So the family's last trip was actually to Disneyland, and the child met his hero Spider-Man there. So they wanted to incorporate Spider-Man into the gravestone. Here's a quote from a representative of Disney and how they responded to this matter. Quote, "We followed a policy that began with Walt Disney himself that does not permit the use of characters on headstones, cemetery, or other memorial markers or funeral urns." End quote. And it's crazy because people are just spreading their ashes all over Disneyland. It's just, I don't know. It just seems wild to me. It seems pretty innocuous to allow a Spider-Man etching into a young person's grave because they loved Spider-Man. You know, I don't know. I don't understand it. Now, I want to talk a little bit about Walt Disney's shenanigans. The man himself, the founder of the company. Let's go through some of the dark secrets associated with him. Disney made war propaganda and military training videos during World War II. They literally Disneyfied art styles or used Disneyfied art styles to demonstrate to soldiers how to operate and fire anti-tank missiles. The government literally is like, hey, Disney, those movies are doing pretty well. Can we train our soldiers using cool family-friendly artwork? This is real. This is a real thing that happened. That's crazy. The next one is also very, very wild. There's literally 2 ex-Nazis were responsible for designing certain aspects of the Disney park. The first is Werner von Braun. He was a member of the Nazi Party. He was involved in developing German rocket technology. Now, Werner von Braun, I'm sure listeners of the podcast are familiar with this name because it's come up many different times. Following the end of World War II, there were a number of Nazi scientists that were transported to the United States as a part of Operation Paperclip. And actually from this led to a lot of these researchers working at NASA, and Werner von Braun was like one of the top dogs at NASA, but he's a legit Nazi that was like known Nazi, and not just like, I was only doing it so I wouldn't die. He was hardcore, crazy shit. And here he is in the United States working at NASA, but also he was helping design Disneyland's rocket to the moon. That whole period of history is wild. The whole Operation Paperclip thing, very wild times. There was another guy, his name's Hans Scharf, and he was a Nazi and was referred to as the master interrogator. He also, he's brought over. He built large mosaic murals at Walt Disney World and Epcot. So he's this artist, former Nazi, the master interrogator, and he's just like working with Disney. It's pretty crazy. Now, some other dark secrets. This one is pretty crazy as well. Walt Disney actually thought and felt guilty. At least we obviously don't know exactly what Walt Disney's thinking, but the claim is that he felt guilt that he had actually been responsible for his mother's death. Following the success of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, Walt and his brother Roy bought their parents a new home in North Hollywood. His mother, Flora Disney, complained of a weird smell coming from the furnace, so Walt hires a repairman to come fix the issue, but apparently he never did fix the issue. The housekeeper finds Walt's mother and father, his father's name is Elias Disney, finds them unconscious and starts trying to drag them out of the house to the front lawn. Elias was resuscitated and he does live, but Flora Disney was not so fortunate. She passes away. Apparently, Elias had passed out trying to get his wife out of the house. So he was actually trying to get Flora out first, but in doing so, he himself passed out. And then the housemaid finds them and tries to save both of them. Now, some allege that Walt felt he was responsible for this tragedy because he had been the one to purchase the home. And not only that, when he tried to fix the issue, he failed to fix the issue. So there's these claims that Walt Disney felt guilty that he had killed his mother. Did you know that Walt Disney was an FBI informant from 1940 to his death in 1966? He was considered a full special agent in charge contact. So during the Hoover administration, Walt passed on information about certain Hollywood figures to the FBI if they were suspected as being communists or political subversives. So at this time, the US was going through the second wave of the Red Scare. This was a period of time after World War II, but during the Cold War that was just straight marked by fear of communist infiltration into American society. Part of Walt's job was, okay, you're really involved, you're embedded in Hollywood and media. If there's any communists in these works or that you hear anything about, just snitch on them to the FBI. That's what he was doing. And also I found that the FBI let Walt Disney film in the FBI headquarters, and that was part of this arrangement. This is something I had no idea about. That's pretty wild if this is all the case. I believe this information is coming from a New York Times article where they said they authenticated the sources that this is all coming from. So I believe that this is actually a real thing. It's pretty crazy. Who knew that Disney was associated with so many dark events? As mentioned before, obviously this section's not all encompassing. There are many other deaths, there's many crimes, there's lawsuits, there's other strange secrets. But I think this gives us all an idea of the shadow side behind everything. And I think this is a good time to move into final thoughts. While I was doing this research, I want to mention that it was actually kind of hard to find things through Google search. Even DuckDuckGo. Both of them were not perfect. And I'll tell you what I mean by this. When I was trying to search random crimes and dark events, a lot of the criminal stuff, it appears to actually, and this could just be all me making this up in my head during my search process, but a lot of the criminal stuff seems to be masked by like top dark stories of Disney characters or more innocuous things like that. And it got me thinking while I'm doing this research, is this intentional? Because this way the company can have dark Disney stuff still be out there and searchable and have it be easily discoverable, but it's not the criminal stuff. It's just like the top 10 stories that Disney characters are based on, or the top urban legends and top myths. So there's a ghost here. That kind of stuff is showing up in the content media machines like BuzzFeed and people's blogs. But overall, it's serving to mask and make it harder to find actually documented crimes. I'd be curious to know what you guys think about that. Is maybe that's actually what's going on. Try and do a Google of Disney darkness. It's going to be like the subliminal versus urban legends that come up. It's not going to be the more criminal stuff that we outlined, or the dark deaths and stuff. Those are a little bit harder to find, and you have to go deeper into the search, at least in my experience putting together this episode. The other thing I have in final thoughts here, this just sticks with me I find this a huge, massive contradiction. This was the public domain and Disney things that we discussed. So Disney being one of the main proponents and drivers lobbying the extension of copyright law. This is a huge contradiction. And I'll explain what I mean here. One reason that Disney is so massively successful is part of their strategy for generating the stories that are the foundation of all the Disney company. They would identify great works of folklore and fairy tales that have stood the test of time. So stories that for hundreds of years have percolated to the top of stories, period. These fairy tales and folklores, we're talking Cinderella, 1300s, things like this, these great works of fiction, they would identify them. And because they're public domain, because they're so old, Disney would just do the story and just take out the deaths and the brutal murders. So it's like you could say you're being inspired by the story, but like you're adhering to the story pretty strongly. And it's great because great writers wrote it already and it stood the test of time. So it's been, in an evolutionary sense, selected for already. So you just take those stories that resonate strongly with audiences because they're based on these strong, fundamental human archetypal structures. And people can't help but be glued to these stories because from a deep archetypal perspective, they're just hijacking people's minds because the stories are so great. And then you just use those to build your empire. But what's interesting, you're using the public domain to build your empire, but then once you've put these things in place, you're copywriting them and lobbying to extend copyright for 95 years, almost a century. There's a huge contradiction there. It's like the public domain built you, but you won't allow the public domain to access the things that you've built. I find a very strong contradiction there. Maybe I'm not looking at this correctly. You guys can let me know what you think about this as well. It seems kind of savage and ironic. That's my thoughts on that. Throughout this research, obviously, we went through a lot of dark and sinister cases, very weird things here and there. But one thing I learned from doing this research is several of the cases, to me, indicate that at least fragments or small compartments of Disney simply don't give a fuck about anything. And I'm not saying the whole company is like that or many of the people there are like that. I think the vast majority are actually trying to do good work and do good things. But when you get to a certain size, at any size of organization, there are pockets or fragments or compartments that are trying to be nefarious. For instance, the whole Disney Plus situation, that Spider-Man thing, the brain-eating amoeba, they don't even shut down the park, the animal abuse thing, sending that child predator back to his home country. All this stuff's really out of control. And I mean, there's a lot of things in this episode that are completely out of control, but it shows to me that there's fractions that contain, like truly evil people. I don't know. I don't know how else to say it. That's what it seems to me. And that's kind of unsettling that that's the case. And what do you do about that? Honestly, you have a company so massive and huge and all encompassing with such large influence. How do you check and keep in check every piece of it? And that's just kind of disturbing that that's the case. But I think it's like that for any large organization. The other thing I want to mention, personally, I've never really been a big Disney fan. I don't know why, but I've never been one to rewatch Disney films or even seek them out. I don't get excited about Disney things. I was obviously exposed to Disney films as a child. Who wasn't? They're all over the place, but I didn't really seek them out. And when people bring them up, I don't really care to watch them. So to come across all this disturbing shit, it didn't really shatter any narrative for me. I wasn't really involved with the brand throughout my life anyways. So I'm curious to know, did it shatter it for you? Like if you were raised on Disney and you have a propensity for Disney, maybe you have children of your own that you show Disney to, maybe nieces and nephews. What do you think about all this? Is your childhood ruined? Are you going to continue watching? Is it kind of like I was saying, it's just dark compartments, small pieces of the company that do crazy shit, but the rest of it's fine. So it's okay. You can't really get rid of stuff like that. I'm curious to know what others' experiences were, because for me, I was just like, oh shit, like another big company is evil. Like it's not that crazy. The other thing I'm curious about is, did you like this iceberg format? Is this something I should do more of in the future, starting with kind of things everybody knows about, moving to more obscure, dark themes as we move through? Let me know what you think about that. And, thanks everybody for listening. I really appreciate that. And for the longtime listeners, you will know that the podcast traditionally rolls out of the episode with the catchphrase, slap that ass and ride the wave. But I would like to try something different today. But I did want to share a small personal story with all the OGs still listening, so you can see where I'm coming from on this. When the podcast started, there was actually 4 of us in total, and we were talking about whacked out shit around a single $20 Amazon mic in a living room. At the time, myself and the former hosts of the show, we chose the phrase, slap that ass and ride the wave, to honor a mutual friend that had passed away around the time we started doing this. And I realize that sounds pretty wild to honor someone with such a crazy choice of words. But the thing was, this was a catchphrase that our friend used to say often. And it was always said at outrageous and hilarious, inappropriate times. But it was always awesome. And it was just a memory we had that we could share and honor him in some way. We figured, it would be a fun way to end episodes that we did together. It was almost an inside reminder of a mutual bond or a nod to the past among myself and the other hosts. But now that I'm going to be moving forward solo, and there's no one to say the other half of the phrase or share that mutual nod with, I'd like to associate the show with a different phrase. A phrase true to the community that I'd like to build here, and a phrase that I've already commonly used on the show many times. So with that, may good karma and vibes be with all of you. I would like to give massive props and credits to our producer tier on Patreon. Thank you to David Cheesem, Shelly Terry, SF Baby Doll, Big Ball Small Wiener, Batcat Meatloaf, Dirty Dangles, Velcro Shoe Guy, Tosh Collins and the future anglers of Indian Lake, Ohio, Honest Elliot, Christian J, and Wheeler Frisk for enabling today's episode and the continued growth of the show.